Tonight, a warm story from the soft end of summer, long ago, about an old woman who kept bees, the golden honey she took from them by smoke and candlelight, and the share she always left behind. At the soft end of the summer, in the still hour before dark, old Mara went down her garden to take the honey from her bees. It was the right time for it. And she knew the right time the way she knew everything about her bees, which was by long years of paying close attention. The summer's flowers were nearly done now, and the days were drawing in, and the hives were as full and heavy with honey as they would get all year. So this evening, this still warm evening, at the very turn of the seasons, was the evening to take it. Mara had kept bees all her life, in this same garden, in the row of old hives along the sunny wall, the round straw baskets, the old kind, that the bees lived in and had lived in for as long as she could remember. She had kept them as her grandmother had kept them before her, and learned it all at her grandmother's side as a girl. And there was very little about bees that Mara did not know. She knew their year, and their moods, and their weather. She knew the sound of a happy hive, and the sound of a fretful one. And above all, she knew the one great rule of it, the rule her grandmother had taught her first, and last, and oftenest, which was the whole secret of keeping bees well. You never take it all. The hives hummed their warm, low, even hum along the wall in the dusk. The sound of thousands of small lives, all busy and content together inside. A sound Mara had listened to all her life and found, as she always did, deeply peaceful. It was the hum of a hive at the end of a good summer, full and warm and well. She stood a moment in the warm dusk garden and just listened to it. The light was going soft and gold. The last bees of the day were drifting home heavy to the hives. And it was time, gently, to take the year's honey, her share of it, and only her share, and to leave the bees the rest. She lit her candle lantern against the coming dark and set it on the wall and began. First, before she opened anything, she made a little smoke. This was how you asked the bees gently to let you in. Not by force, never by force, but with a little soft smoke, the way it had always been done. Mara lit a small smoulder of dry herbs and old wood in her little tin and worked it until it gave off a cool, soft, pale smoke, sweet-smelling. And she puffed it, slow and easy, around the mouth of the first hive, and a little in under its edge. And the bees grew calm. That was what the smoke did. It gentled them and settled them and sent them down quiet into the hive to their honey. Nobody quite knew why, but the bees had always answered the soft smoke this way, going still and easy under it. And so, for as long as there had been beekeepers, there had been the soft smoke first, the gentle asking before the taking. Mara watched the busy hum at the hive mouth soften and slow and sink down inward as the smoke did its quiet work, and she waited, unhurried, until the hive was calm and the bees were easy, and it was all right to open. She was not afraid of them, her bees, and they were not afraid of her. That was the long understanding between them, built up over a whole lifetime of gentle handling. She wore no great armor against them, but only worked among them slow and calm and unhurried, with the soft smoke and her steady old hands, the way you move among any creatures you have known a long time and mean no harm to. A bee or two lit on her wrist, walked a little way, and lifted off again. She did not mind. She worked the smoke and waited, and let the bees grow quiet, and was, among the warm hum of them in the gold dusk, entirely at her ease. Then, with the bees gentled and easy, she opened the hive and lifted out the honey. And there, inside, in the warm, dim heart of the hive, was the year's whole work. The combs, the honeycomb, heavy and golden and full, sheet upon sheet of it. The little six-sided cells, all capped over with pale wax and brimming with honey. The whole summer's worth of flowers, gathered and made and stored away by the bees. Mara lifted a comb out, gently, into the candlelight, and it was heavy in her two hands, properly heavy, dense and dripping and gold, and it caught the candle flame and the last of the dusk and glowed from within like something lit, a slab of pure stored summer, still faintly warm from the life of the hive. It was, she always thought, lifting it out into the light, one of the loveliest things in the whole world. Honeycomb, fresh from the hive. The deep, clean gold of it. The neat wax cells, made so perfectly by such small makers. The slow, bright bead of honey at its broken edge. The smell that came up off it. The warm, sweet, flowery smell of a whole summer, caught and kept. All of it made, every drop, by the small humming lives in the hive, made out of the flowers, over the long, warm months, cell by patient cell, and given up now, some of it, into her two old hands in the candlelight. She set the full comb gently in her waiting basket and lifted out another, and the warm, sweet smell of the honey filled the dusk garden, and the candle glowed gold on the gold of the comb, and the bees hummed low and easy all around her in the soft dark. But she did not take it all. That was the thing. That was always the thing. The rule her grandmother had pressed on her above every other. You never, ever take it all. Mara lifted out only some of the combs, the ones she could spare. Enough for her own year, enough to see her through the winter, with a little sweetness, and a little besides to give away, and no more than that. And the rest, the greater part, the deep, heavy heart of the hive's store, she left exactly where it was, untouched, for the bees. For the honey was not really hers. She only minded the bees and kept them, and gave them their good warm place along the wall. The honey they made themselves, out of the summer, and they made it for one reason: to live on through the winter, when there are no flowers and no warmth and nothing to be had outside, and a hive must eat its own stored summer to come through to the spring. To take all of that from them would be to take their very lives, and Mara would no more have done it than she would have starved a friend. So she took her fair share, the share they could spare, and left them theirs, full and deep and plenty, enough to keep the whole hive warm and fed through the longest winter. And she did it without a second thought, because that was simply how it was done, how it had always been done by anyone who kept bees and meant to keep them well and long. It was, she had come to think over her long life, a kind of bargain, and a fair and ancient one. The bees made the honey and shared a little of it with her, and in return she gave them a safe, warm home and her long care and a winter's peace. And on it went, year after year, each one minding the other, and neither taking too much. That was the whole of good beekeeping, and it was, when you stop to think about it, very nearly the whole of how to live. Then she closed the hive gently back up. She settled what she had not taken, and gave the bees one last soft breath of smoke, and closed the lid down over them, snug and safe, and the hive was whole again and full again, its deep winter store sealed up inside it, the bees already drawing back together into their warm, humming cluster for the night. She moved on down the row and did the same to the next hive and the next, all along the sunny wall in the deepening dusk. A little smoke, a few combs lifted, the greater share left, the lid closed gently down, until she had been to every one of them and taken her fair part of the year's honey, and left each hive deep and full and ready for the cold. And at each hive, before she moved on, she did the last small thing, the thing her grandmother had always done, and her grandmother before her. She told the bees, low and quiet, leaning a little toward the warm straw, she told them the small news of the year: who in the village had married, and who had had a child, what the weather had done, and what the garden had done, the small doings of the household the bees belonged to. For it was an old belief, older than anyone, that you must tell the bees the news, and keep them part of the family, and never leave them out of things, and that bees who were told and kept and minded stayed content and stayed and gave their honey year on year. Mara had told her bees the news all her life. She did not altogether know whether they understood her, but she told them gently, every year, at the taking, and her bees had never once left her. By the time she had finished, the dusk had gone to dark, and the garden was quiet, and the bees were all closed snug in their hives along the wall, settling down into the long, warm hum that would carry them through the winter. They had their summer stored up inside with them now, sheet upon sheet of golden comb, all the warmth of all those flowers, enough to last them through to the spring, and they would cluster close around it all the cold months and eat it slow and keep one another warm and come through to the first flowers of next year, the way they always did. Mara stood in the dark garden a moment and listened to the low, contented hum of them, all safe, all fed, all well, and was glad. She gathered up her basket of golden combs and her candle lantern and turned back up the garden toward the house. In the house, by the candle, she set out her share of the year's honey. She laid the golden combs out on the scrub table in the candlelight. Not a great deal of it, just her fair part, but enough. Enough to sweeten her own long winter and to give a comb to this neighbour and that one, and to set a little by. The gold of it glowed soft in the small flame, and the warm, flowery smell of the whole summer filled the quiet kitchen. And she looked at it with the plain, quiet satisfaction of a thing done rightly, a good harvest, and an honest one. And out in the dark garden, along the warm wall, the bees hummed on in their hives, full and safe, and settling for the winter with the greater part of it, their part, deep and golden inside with them. Mara could just hear them, faintly, through the open window, the low, even hum of them in the dark, and the sound of it pleased her, as it always had, for she had taken her share and left them theirs, the way she always had, the way her grandmother had taught her, the way it had been done for longer than anyone could say, each one minding the other, neither taking too much. The old fair bargain kept for one more year. She pinched out all but the last candle. She had her sweetness for the winter, and the bees had theirs, and the garden was quiet and dark and well. And tomorrow, and all the cold months coming, the bees would sleep warm in their hives on their share of the summer, and she would sleep warm in her house on hers. And the spring would come round again in its own good time, and they would all begin again. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, there was only the candle, and the honey, and the low, far hum of the bees in the dark, and a fair day's work fairly done. The golden combs glowing soft on the table in the last candlelight, the year's sweetness gathered, and honest. Out in the dark garden, the bees settled deep and safe in their hives, full of their own share of the summer, humming low and warm against the coming cold. The old fair bargain kept for one more year, each minding the other, neither taking too much, and the beekeeper her share taken and theirs left, content in the quiet dark, with the long winter ahead and the spring sure to follow.